Xllerate is capable of incorporating the use of formula functions within its program code lines. The use of these formula functions is helpful or even necessary. Some of these formula functions are provided with Xllerate, and others are included with Excel's standard formula functions list. Here's a summary of the formula functions we will be covering in this series of lessons. The ConvertNumberToWords formula function will convert a numeric amount into US dollars stated as words. This function would come in handy in a business interruption situation. You could quickly mock up a check template and, using the loop method, print up checks on check stock. I will show you a simple example using the business interruption scenario. Here's the table of data that I need to use to produce checks. This data could have been retrieved from anywhere, an off-site storage location, a backup file on a thumb drive, or some other method. We are at the step in our business interruption scenario where we have a list of data and we're ready to produce checks. I have already written my check printing program. I'll review how the program works in a minute. I would like to show you the check template portion of the program. Obviously, this is a representation of a check. Since this is a lesson on ConvertNumberToWords formula function, here is where it's used. It is based upon the value in cell J8. Here is a view of cell J8. You may review the lesson on VLookUp if you are not familiar with that formula function. Generally, this formula function is retrieving the check amount based upon the check number in cell J4. The value in J4 comes from the cell reserved for the loop list variable on the program worksheet. The payee name is a combination of several formula functions. The first part is to retrieve the payee's first name. This middle portion is to retrieve the payee's last name. And this last portion is the formula function that repeats the same character for a designated number of times, a dash in this example. The date utilizes the now formula function wrapped with a text formula. Now I'll tell you a little bit about the program. Row 2 tells the program where to start the loop. Remember, column A on this row is reserved for the loop list variable, and this cell will be populated at runtime with that variable. Row 3 prints the check to the designated printer. My printer name is Adobe. Row 4 indicates the end of the loop, and row 5 indicates the end of the program. Watch as the program steps through the code. The program picks up the first loop variable, or 1010 in this case. See how cell A2 is populated with 1010? Next, the program will print the check. Okay, the check has been printed. The program will verify if the end of the loop list has been reached. The end of the loop list has not been reached. The program will return to the beginning of the loop and will pick up the next loop list variable, or 1011 in this case. Cell A2 is populated with a new loop list variable, or 1011. Now the program will print the check. Okay, I'll cancel here and run the program at normal speed. Be sure and watch the check form change as the new loop list variable is populated. The program printed 9 checks in about 12 seconds, including spelling out the check amount in words. Think how much time the ConvertNumberToWords formula function and this program would have saved if you had to generate 3,000 checks. For more information on formula functions, review one of the other lessons in this series, or review the Xllerate Help Manual, go to the index and locate the keyword Formula. The CreateDelimitedList formula function takes the value in multiple cells and creates a single text string of those values. Each cell value is separated with a user-defined delimiter, and the user has the option of including or excluding empty cells. I will show you several examples. In this first example, I have several cells of data here, and I've created the default delimited list here. Notice the semicolon between each cell value. Semicolon is the default delimiter if none is selected. In this example, I have elected to use a space as a delimiter. The range in this example includes blank cells. Since the include empty cells argument has been left blank, the function will include blank cells in the delimited list. To exclude blank cells, just modify the formula function by adding false in the include empty cells argument. I will demonstrate the use of CreateDelimitedList function formula in two scenarios: in creating a subtotal on a report, and in generating a delimited list using the insert function formula using field header TLC function. Here is the program I've written for the first scenario. Row 2 selects the data worksheet. Row 3 will create a subtotal by salesperson. WSB5 needs a list of fields to subtotal. In reviewing the help tip comment for the WSB5 field, it states, separate all field header names with a semicolon. This is the perfect use for the CreateDelimitedList formula function. In reviewing the data worksheet, I have determined I want to subtotal the quantity, per unit price, and total columns. To enter the CreateDelimitedList function, click on the FX box on the formula bar. Select User Defined from the Category List box. Select CreateDelimitedList from the Function box. To enter the cell address, navigate to the target worksheet and highlight the desired range. Remember, the required delimiter is a semicolon, so I will enter a semicolon here. Include empty cells equals false. And here's the results of the formula. Watch how the CreateDelimitedList is used in the program. Row 2 selects the data worksheet. Row 3 creates a subtotal by salesperson, summing the quantity, per unit price, and total columns. Okay, the subtotal is done. And here are the subtotaled fields on the data worksheet. That takes care of scenario number 1. Scenario number 2 is to use the CreateDelimitedList formula function in the insert function formula using field header TLC function. In this program, the CreateDelimitedList formula function is used in row 4. For more information on the insert function formula using field header TLC function, go to the Xllerate help manual. I'm going to step through the code. Row 2, select the source data worksheet. Row 3, insert a new field header, called Delimited List, to the right of the total field header. Row 4, fill the cells below the Delimited List field header with the formula in WSB2. Okay, that is done. Let me show you the formula pasted by row 4. And that's the end of scenario number 2. For more information on the CreateDelimitedList formula function, or any function used in this lesson, please refer to the Xllerate help manual. In some cases, you may wish to remove special characters, numbers, or alphabetic letters from a text string. You may find this formula function useful in building file names. Here, for example, I have built an Excel file name based upon Zach Smith's name. I have concatenated the file name with a date stamp. Also, if the person's name changes, the formula does not have to change. When I change the name to Mary Jane Smith, the formula reflects the change. Another use for the GetAlphaNumeric formula function is to strip out all the unwanted alpha text from a string to get at the required numeric data. Let me take you through a couple of scenarios of how you might use this function in a program. Here's a summary of some invoice data. The first scenario I'll present to you will be to strip the numeric numbers from these fields. And the second scenario will be to create a report for each one of these salespersons and name the report using the salesperson name as part of the file name. To strip the numeric characters, I've created this program. I'll explain each line as we step through the code. Row 2 will select the invoice worksheet. Row 3 will insert a new field header name called invoice number and place it to the right of invoice ID. Row 4 will insert a formula, the one found in WSV2, to all the cells underneath the column invoice number. In a moment, I'll stop the program and show you the formula. Let me just have the program auto-fit the columns. As you can see, the GetAlphaNumeric formula has stripped the numeric data from the target data. Okay, I'm finished with scenario number 1. Let's move on to scenario number 2. And in this scenario, I will use the GetAlphaNumeric formula function to generate flexible file names. Row 8 is the line of code where the program will be saving the workbook. The workbook name is a formula based on a combination of 1. The loop list variable, found here, and 2. Today's date, wrapped in a text format formula function. Stepping through the program will give you a better idea of how this is going to work. Row 2 will select the invoice list worksheet. Row 3 will create a unique list of salespersons and place that list on the salesperson list worksheet. Row 4, here we want to generate a report for every salesperson. So the program's loop will be pointed to the unique salesperson list just generated by row number 3. Now we'll pick up the first loop list variable, which is Andrew Fuller. Notice the loop list variable is now populated with Andrew Fuller. Row 5 will select the invoice list worksheet. Row 6 will autofilter for salesperson equal to Andrew Fuller. OK. Row 7 will create a new workbook and place a copy of the visible cells on the invoice list worksheet in the new workbook. The new workbook has been created. Copy from here and paste the data here. Row 8. Here's where the GetAlphaNumeric formula function comes in handy. It has stripped out all the non-alphabetic characters, in this example spaces, and the second half of the formula concatenates the date to complete the file name. With row 9, the workbook is closed. Row 10 will check to see if this is the end of the loop. It is not, so the program will return to the beginning of the loop. Here it will pick up the new loop list variable, and the next loop list variable is Janet Leverling. The loop list variable is populated in column A. The invoice list worksheet is selected. Now the reason the invoice list worksheet is still showing Andrew Fuller is because we haven't processed the line of code that will autofilter for Janet yet. That's the next line of code. Now the program will process the autofilter for Janet. Here it is. Next, the new workbook is created. and the GetAlphaNumeric formula function is used to create the Save As file name. The workbook is closed. I'm going to cancel the step through and run through the program in real time. The program is finished. Here's a view of the 6 reports generated by the program. Notice how each one has the salesperson's name and the date stamp. For more information on the GetAlphaNumeric formula function, or any function demonstrated here, please refer to the Xllerate Help Manual. The GetFileExists formula function determines if the desired file exists or not. In this example, we will use the formula function to determine if the workbook Andrew Fuller _ 05252007.xls exists. And it does. Here's a view of the reports directory. I will change the file name to Jackie Brown _ 05252007.xls. And according to this calculation, the file does not exist in the reports directory. And from the view of the reports directory, the file does not exist. The GetFileExists formula function can be used on a program worksheet to have a code line perform a TLC function if the file exists, and perform a different TLC function if the file does not exist. I have written this program to demonstrate how you might use the GetFileExists formula function. I used the GetFileExists formula function down here. Does the file denoted in J3 and K3 exist? Here's how I used it in my program. If the file exists equals true, then the value of this cell would be apps _ outlook. If the file does not exist, skip to the next line of code. The formula on the next line of code states, if the file does not exist, then the TLC function will equal apps _ outlook. If the file does exist, then skip to the next line of code. So in general, if the file exists, use this line of code to send the email. And if the file does not exist, use this line of code to send the email. Stepping through the code will show you how this will work. Row 2. It starts the program loop. It will pick up the first loop list variable from the salesperson list worksheet, and that would be Andrew Fuller. Row 3. Since the Andrew Fuller _ 05252007.xls report exists, the program will send this email to Andrew Fuller along with the file as an attachment to the email. Row 4. Since the Andrew Fuller report exists, the program will skip this line of code. Row 5 will check to see if the end of the loop list has been reached. It has not been reached, so the program will go back to the beginning of the loop and pick up the next loop list variable. The loop list variable now is Jackie Brown. The Jackie Brown _ 05252007.xls file does not exist, and since the file does not exist, row 3 will be skipped. And row 4 will send an email to Jackie Brown telling her she did not have any sales today. I will cancel the step-through process and run the program in real time. Okay, the program is finished. Let's review the emails that have been generated. Here are the emails that have been generated. 2 of them indicate that no sales reports were available, one for Julie Andrews and one for Jackie Brown. In reviewing the reports directory, you can see that no report exists for either Julie Andrews or Jackie Brown. The program has performed correctly. It has sent reports to those individuals who had report files and sent a No Report Available email to those individuals who did not have a report file. To learn more about the GetFileExists formula function, or any function used in this lesson, please refer to the Xllerate Help Manual. Has this ever happened to you? You have a formula that references a cell on another worksheet, and the worksheet referenced in that formula is deleted, and your formula becomes corrupted. If you have, then the indirect formula function is just what you need. Here, I have wrapped the original formula with an indirect function formula. I will delete the data worksheet, and even though the value of the formula returns a reference error, the actual formula has not been damaged or corrupted. If I were to put the contents of the data worksheet back, the indirect formula returns the correct value. The key is the indirect formula function uses a text string to reference the worksheet range address. Do you see the double quotes around the worksheet and the range address? Those double quotes convert the address reference to a text string. With the address reference as a text string, now the data worksheet can be deleted and reinserted many times without corrupting the formula. When the data worksheet is returned, this formula will be updated with the value in cell B4 on the data worksheet. I have a program that queries employee information from a database on row 2. Row 3 selects the program worksheet. This line of code is not required. However, when I run the program in real time, I want the program to focus back on the program worksheet so you can see the email address change as the program processes each loop list variable. Row 4 sets the employee list created in row 2 to be the loop list. Row 5 sends an email to each employee on the loop list. Row 6 determines if the end of the loop has been reached, and row 7 is the end of the program. The email formula in WSV3 on row 5 references the employee list worksheet. Therefore, if the employee list worksheet was deleted, this formula would become corrupted. In stepping through the code, row 2 will delete any existing employee list worksheet before downloading the queried records to a new employee list worksheet. I will cancel the step through so you can see what happened to the email address formula in WSV3 of row 5. Since the formula referenced the employee list worksheet, and row 2 just deleted the employee list worksheet and replaced it with a new one, the formula became corrupted. Okay, why don't we use the indirect formula function instead? Just replace the reference error with indirect, open parentheses, double quote, employee list, then a double quote after the range address, and a closing parentheses. I will test the formula by entering a value in the loop list placeholder. And the formula works. Now if we step through the code, the formula will not become corrupted. Row 2 queries the database and creates the new employee list worksheet. Row 3 selects the program worksheet. Row 4 picks up the new loop list variable. Row 5 sends the email to J. O'Neill. Row 6 determines if it's the end of the loop list. It is not. Back to row 4 to pick up the next loop list variable. Row 5 sends the email to S. Carter. I will cancel the step through and run the program in real time. Watch the WSV3 variable on row 5. The program is complete, and here's a view of the email sent. For more information on the indirect formula function, please refer to the Excel help. The substitute formula function allows you to replace text in a cell value with another text string. In this example, the target cell B4 has a value of sales information. Using the substitute formula function, the text sales can be replaced with revenue. This example illustrates that the substitute formula can replace the first instance of the text found that matches the criteria. If the first instance argument is removed, then all instances of the old text will be replaced. I'm going to show you how you might use the substitute formula function in an Xllerate program. Here I have a SQL query worksheet. Refer to the lesson on external queries for more information on how to create a SQL query worksheet. First, set up a new Xllerate program worksheet. I'll call mine Test. The TLC function to use is Data Query External Database. You can select the generic data source name from the drop-down list. We'll use Access Files. Enter the directory path and the database name in WSV2 and WSV3. WSV4 requires the SQL worksheet name, in this case, SQL_MS_query_1. There is not a loop list for this example. I'll delete the contents of that cell. What will be the name of the worksheet after the results of the query have been downloaded? I'll call it Data. WSV7 through WSV10 are reserved for values that may be used by the SQL code at runtime. Let me show you what I mean. Here's the SQL code. The records to be downloaded is limited to those with a hire date greater than or equal to April 1st, 1992, and less than or equal to August 14th, 1992. We want that SQL to be a little more flexible. How about from January 1st, 1992 to December 31st, 1992? At runtime, a memory variable called WSV7 will exist. Its value will be January 1st, 1992. The same is true for WSV8, except its value will be 12/31/1992. In order for our SQL code to reflect these values at runtime, we must modify the code. I'll move the code line here to B4. In cell A4, I will use the substitute formula to replace the existing value of 1992-04-01 with the value of WSV7. I know I have written the formula correctly because the 1992-04-01 has been replaced with the WSV7_runtime only value. There's another twist to this particular SQL code line. Since it is a date, and the SQL code format for this date is specific, in other words, YYYY-MM-DD, I want to be sure that the format of WSV7 is correct. Therefore, I will wrap the value of WSV7 with a text function formula, forcing the format of WSV7 to be the YYYY-MM-DD format. Now we have to follow these exact same steps to replace 1992-08-14 with WSV8. Let me just move this out of the way, and I'll move the code line over to B4. In cell A4, I'll use the substitute formula again to replace the existing value of 1992-08-14 with the value of WSV8. The formula is written correctly because the value 1992-08-14 has been replaced with WSV8 runtime only. As with the WSV7, I want to make sure the date format is correct, so I'll wrap the WSV8 value with the text function formula. The SQL has been modified for the runtime values for WSV7 and WSV8, and has also been modified to account for the date formats. We are ready to give our SQL code a try. Let's step through and watch what happens. This point in the step through allows you to review the SQL code and verify that the modified line has the correct values and is formatted correctly. We may now review the results of the query. Is this the data we expected? I'm going to cancel the program. Here is the program at normal speed. Done. For more information on the substitute formula function, refer to the Excel help. The VLookUp function formula allows you to search the leftmost column for a value and return the value of a designated column in the table. Examples will illustrate the use of this function. Here I have a table of data. The key to the VLookUp function formula is the lookup value. I will type the lookup value here and enter the VLookUp formula in this cell. You may access the VLookUp function by clicking the FX button and selecting VLookUp from the function list. The first argument is the lookup value, which is in cell A12. Next is the table range address. This argument needs the column number that contains the value you want. I will use 1. False means I want an exact match. And the formula returns the value in the first column. Watch as I change the column argument to the number 2. If the column number were 3, if the column number were 4, what would happen if I changed the lookup value? The VLookUp returns the value in the fourth column for 2094. Let me show you an example of how you might use the VLookUp in an Xllerate program. This is a simple Xllerate program which will process through a loop list and send an email. Row 3, the email line of the code, is unfinished. To make coding of row 3 easier, I will get a loop list variable and fill in the cell reserved for the loop list variables on the program worksheet. The WSV3 field needs an email address value. I will use the VLookUp function formula to look up the email address for the current loop list variable. Get the lookup value, enter the table address. Column 4 is the email address. False equals exact match. Here's the results of the formula. I will complete the remaining TLC function variables. As the loop list variable changes, the to email address will change. If there is no loop list variable, the to email address will reflect NA. Let's step through the code. Row 2, get the loop list variable. That would be 1010. The to email address changed. Outlook is opened. The email address is sent to J. O'Neill. It is not the end of the loop. Get the next loop list variable. Send the email to S. Carter. It is not the end of the loop. Next loop list variable. Email is sent to D. Jackson. It is not the end of the loop. Next loop list variable. The email is sent to T. Judge. And it is the end of the loop, and the program terminates. Now the program will be run in real time. Watch the WSV3 field of row 3. The program is finished. Here is a view of the emails sent. For more information on VLookUp, refer to the Excel Help Manual.